Welcome to Chai Pe Kharcha, where we have conversations on personal finance among four NRI professionals working at tech firms. Think of these like water cooler chats you have at the office. Only this time, you will have Ishan, Madhwesh, Rohit, and Siddharth as colleagues you will be listening into. Before we get started, a quick disclaimer. We are not financial experts. The content provided in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. Always consult with a qualified financial professional if you need financial advice. Hello everyone, welcome again to our series of casual conversations on personal finance. So today's topic, which is an interesting one and which is probably most personal to all of us, is where do we invest our money? By where I mean which instruments do we invest in? What is the sources of research that we use? And what allocation do we have if we have multiple investment destinations? What is the allocation that we have in each of the destinations? Cool. Ishan, do you want to start?
Sure. So my allocation right now is apart from the cash that I keep, which is the emergency funds, we've already spoken about the expense accounts that we've already spoken about. All of my investments currently are in direct equity. So I'm probably on the very aggressive path of investments, trying to get as much return as possible, which hasn't always worked out, but hoping at some point the market's going to pick up and I will see those returns. It is not probably the most advisable thing, and I have seen the negative effects of it as well. I would recommend starting with index funds and mutual funds, but because I started my investment journey very late, I went into direct equity.
Cool. Ishan, question on this.
Yeah,
Uh, is this equity only in India or only in the US or is it split?
right now only in the US. So one of the
Uh,
benefits, obviously, that we have being in Singapore is uh, the capital gains benefit. There is no capital gains in Singapore, so it makes sense to be investing in uh, overseas markets that allow for that taxation benefit. The US being one of them. That's one of the reasons I started investing there.
and why have you not considered mutual funds as an option?
Primarily
Any
because
particular reason?
I wanted to be aggressive on growth investments than taking a long-term view. I'm not saying that's a good thing. So probably we started off with the case of what not to do. Because I have obviously seen both the good and the bad of direct investments in equity, and I'm still learning on this. But I do feel like mutual funds is a long-term growth plan. It's where you should be investing, whether it's uh, equity mutual funds or multiple instruments mutual funds. It's probably a long-term plan, but I mean, having read the research I have read, direct equities also helps wealth uh, in a much bigger way. But that's my point of view. So I want to be careful in influencing anyone saying you should go all in on equities.
Got it. Rohit?
I feel that direct equities is definitely a path worth exploring if you have the time and inclination, which I have found lacking. So I have defaulted to mutual funds for my equity investments. But okay, let me maybe take a step back and say that out of all the instruments that I use for investing, I use fixed deposits. I use mutual funds primarily for equity exposure based on the stock options that I get. I have direct equity exposure, yes, but that is more by default than by conscious choice. Apart from that, when I invest in Singapore, I primarily use what is called real estate investment trusts or REITs, which gives me a real estate exposure as well without having to buy actual physical land. And the last main asset class that I have is gold. And the way I invest in gold is through, again, mutual funds. I have a very tiny allocation in some angel investments, and I can talk more about the platform that I use, etc. But that's basically how I am sort of diversified across different assets.
परसेंटेज बताओ ना यार, बता सकते हो तो।
Of course, sir, बिल्कुल बताएंगे। परसेंटेज में अभी
मोटा मोटा।
including my mutual funds and some amount that is here in Singapore, plus company stock, everything. Equity level, overall exposure around 60%. Everything else, including my cash and fixed deposits and everything else, is somewhere around 25-ish%, जिसको मैं कम करने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ अभी. And then the rest, like gold, REIT, ये सब कुछ मिला के maybe like 10% type होगा. So that's like mota how I'm currently positioned. But my target for equity is 65 to 70. So in the next several months, this is, by the way, one lesson: don't put all your money at one time. So over the next several months, I'm going to try and shift my allocation more towards equity.
So equity, when you say equity, you mean direct stock and mutual fund equity wale, right?
No, I mean equity mutual fund. Yeah, I mean equity mutual funds, not direct stocks. I have like 2 or 3 direct stocks, like extremely tiny amounts, which is what I might consider play money. मतलब वो डूब गए. So I have some tiny stocks here and there which I bought and then I play around with it sometimes randomly. पर मेरा major equity portfolio is mutual funds and company stock. That's like the two big ones. So that's what I mean by equity.
ठीक है।
I'll start with my investment philosophy. One is to preserve capital. That's like the primary reason when I do any investing. वो ध्यान में रखता हूँ. दूसरा चीज है कि टू बीट इन्फ्लेशन. यही दो मेरा प्राइमरी ऑब्जेक्टिव्स रहता है. And in terms of my portfolio, I'm pretty aggressive. And the reason I'm pretty aggressive is because I've built some knowledge over the course of my investing journey. So I am like 90% in equity, less than 1% in mutual funds, and probably 5 to 6% in gold. This is like my current allocation, but I hold some cash which I plan to invest into equity as. Mera India and US have more or less equal proportions, I would say somewhere 40%, and the rest is in Singapore. And as Rohit mentioned, rates is again a very good opportunity to invest in Singapore, where you get to hold on some of the larger companies that own some of the malls here across Southeast Asia, actually. And the great thing about them is like they have a very good dividend yield, which also brings in good passive income. And in terms of my equity investing, I also split them into two types of portfolios. One is a long-term view one, and the other is short-term one, which I started very recently because I have some time in my hand where I do some trading based on momentum. And in terms of long-term view, I don't do any changes to the portfolio unless there is like something big happening in those organizations. And those are really biased towards like the bigger companies, the one that have large market caps. And in trading, like I just look for certain companies which have a good momentum where they are breaking out, etc. So yeah, this is my current.
Cool. So in my case, I'm always on the other end. So जैसे we had spoken in one of the previous episodes, for me FD plus cash is 70%, and then उसके बाद 20% should be mutual funds, and 10% includes all the risky investments, which is individual stocks in India and the US, crypto, and yeah, basically वही जितना एक्सपेरिमेंट करना है वही 10% में है सब. Cool. This is good info. We should also discuss some of the sources of.
I have a few that I can share. So I use a few stock screeners. The one that I'm currently paying for is Simply Wall Street. It just helps me look up stocks if I want to do based on certain ratios if I'm looking for something. But my primary place of getting ideas of what could be potential long-term investments. One is the Value Investors Club. It's a website that was started by an investor for getting ideas on what are good value investments. And you can sign up for it, but you only get the information with a 2-month lag unless you yourself submit a value investing idea which they approve is a good idea. So there's some amount of vetting that happens for the ideas that come into it. I think it's a pretty good source. Just that, again, a disclaimer for all equity investments: what someone else sees as a good buy, someone else will see as a good sell. So when you're reading these ideas, it's always good to have some of your own thoughts added to it and don't just blindly copy anything that comes there. The other one is called the Magic Formula website. So this is again another fun website created by a professor where you can just put in stocks above a certain market cap and it will give you a list of stocks that are doing very well on their PE ratios. And I mean, he uses multiple ratios, so not just PE, but PE being one of them. And these are stocks where companies have generally done really well over the long term in how they employ capital. So it's again a good place to get your ideas from of what could be companies that are doing well over a long period of time, not just immediate. Otherwise, if you want to do a momentum play, I think you can just look at any website that gives you the 52-week highs and lows. That could be an easy way to start where something has dropped suddenly and you can check why it has dropped and if it doesn't seem too risky to you. Or if something is going up, why it's going up and what you see as it'll keep going up. So those could be good momentum plays.
Okay, anything to add?
Again, Thoda structure. One is like the fundamental knowledge to learn about the different ratios. How do you analyze the company, etc., etc. And another is a short form knowledge which you need on a daily basis or whenever you're about to make an investment decision. For the first one, the fundamental type of knowledge, I started with a few books which helped me to like learn about how do you like rate a certain company in terms of their balance sheet, etc., etc. I have a good book recommendation there. It is called as Romancing the Balance Sheet. I think, if I'm not wrong, the author is Anil Lamba. This was a very good fundamental book which helped me to like understand the balance sheets of different companies. And this really helps when you want to take a long-term view on a certain company and like also understand like how good the management is placing the capital. In terms of short-term knowledge, which helps on a daily basis, I shared a few websites last time. Things that I could add on here are like even like the basic ones which can give me the news, moneycontrol.com. Recently, Twitter has helped me a lot to understand like what is happening in terms of the market participants on a daily level, which also helps you in terms of like momentum understanding or trading.
ठीक है. We'll
Are there any,
just
sorry, sir,
हाँ,
question for
बोलो,
Madhwesh. Are there any specific accounts on Twitter where you're seeing the analysis on the market?
There are a few accounts. Of course, I am not comfortable sharing the names in a public forum.
Okay.
But also I just do a random search in terms of the stock names to see like how many people are actually interested in it and what is their view. Again, like a disclaimer, you should never use only that information to buy or sell a stock because like Twitter doesn't represent the majority of the market, but that just gives a perspective of what this type of audience are thinking about a particular stock.
Yeah.
Cool. Just for the listeners, we'll put these websites and tips in the show notes so that they can refer to it if they'd like to. ठीक है. Cool. This is a good discussion. Any last comments? Any last thoughts on this before we close out?
I can share a couple of points in terms of my research because I'm not
बताओ तो.
direct equity investor.
हाँ.
Very early in my investing journey, I realized that I probably don't have the patience to track the news and track the prices and track the market movements of multiple companies. And what I basically did was outsource that work to my advisor. So he does the thinking for me. I question his logic. So when I talk to my advisor, I spend more than an hour discussing different options with him, pros and cons of going with one choice versus the other. And after I am super convinced of his logic, and his research, that is when I will decide to make an investment. Beyond that, I do track like a bunch of companies, but I don't track them in the way that अच्छा उनके stock में क्या चल रहा है या उनका कोई is just like general news जिसमें कभी let's say Google की news आ गई या कभी Amazon में कुछ हो गया या कोई whatever Netflix के subscribers गिर गए तो उसका price crash हो गया. तो I get that news, but I don't take action on the basis of that news. I don't count that as sources of information for making investment decisions. The other thing that I do for making investment decisions is what some people might call a macro view. So, an example of that would be India has a demographic dividend. The next 10 years are the years for India to grow because of the China plus one strategy and all the policy changes and reforms that are coming in, and the manufacturing push and the make in India and everything that's happening, people's purchasing power growing. So that makes me bullish on the Indian market as a whole. And then I'm comfortable pushing more money into Indian mutual funds and Indian different instruments. Similarly, when tech stocks fell, I think some 20, 30 odd percent, NASDAQ 100 or something like that, that to me felt like a good entry point to just go into the tech sector instead of buying individual tech stocks. I might go and start buying equity, like NASDAQ 100 equity fund or something of that nature. So that's how I make decisions, and my equity investment decisions are all super long term. Like once I buy something, I don't sell it at least for 3, 5, maybe like I haven't had 10 years of experience yet, but there are certain investments which have been there growing for the last 3, 4, 5 years, and I have no intention of selling them anytime soon either. So that's how I kind of consume that investment information. I use typical websites, your Moneycontrols and all those things. Yes, I consume information from there, but I don't use it to make day-to-day decisions because I feel like that's a tax on my brain based on my personality or the way I operate. So it's hard for me to keep track of all that and then confidently take decisions on the basis of it. So I do only long-term investing, and I do it on a time frame which is much more extended, where some of these macroeconomic factors will start playing out. So that's how I think about my investing style.
Awesome. बहुत सोचते हैं सब लोग इस बारे में. In my case, जैसे we have discussed, 70% तो कैश ही है या एफडी है. सोचा नहीं जाता, but I do research on crypto a lot, ironically. I don't invest as much, पर पढ़ना और देखना बहुत होता है उसमें. If I had to recommend a YouTube channel, Coin Bureau is a good one. For most people familiar with crypto, they would know it. It's quite good, quite comprehensive in the coverage. So that can be seen. ठीक है. It's a good chat again. We went through allocations and some of the research areas to make those allocations. We'll come back again in the next episode with a new topic related to personal finance.